On a freezing winter night, under the dim glow of streetlights, a young pregnant black woman named Amara sat shivering on the cold pavement, her swollen belly pressed against her thin coat, and her eyes reflected a storm of fear, exhaustion, and fading hope. Hundreds of people walked past her, their eyes sliding away as if she didn't exist. Among them was Charles Whitmore, a millionaire known as much for his towering wealth as for his chilling indifference. To him, poverty was a nuisance best ignored. But that night, fate placed Amara directly in his path. What happened next would shatter his reputation, challenge his beliefs, and change two lives forever. Amara had not always been invisible. Just 3 years earlier, she was a bright 19-year-old college student with dreams of becoming a nurse. She was the first in her family to make it to university, and her mother had beamed with pride as she moved into her dorm. But those dreams began to unravel when she fell in love with a man who promised forever, but delivered only betrayal. When Amara became pregnant, instead of support, she was abandoned. He walked away, leaving her with nothing but debt, humiliation, and a growing belly. Without family to rely on, her mother had passed too soon, and her relatives were miles away. Amara dropped out of school and soon found herself without a roof over her head. The shelters she tried were overcrowded. Long lines, filled beds, judgmental eyes. She learned quickly that being young, black, and pregnant carried its own stigma. Strangers muttered harsh words, assuming she was careless, lazy, or worse. But no one saw the girl who had once studied tirelessly in a library, who had dreamed of saving lives as a nurse. Charles Whitmore lived in a different world entirely. Born into wealth, Charles never knew struggle. He was a man whose sharp suits and sharper words made him the face of ruthless business. He invested in luxury, not humanity. To him, people like Amara were statistics, not stories. He had built walls around his heart, and those walls kept him safe from ever feeling too much. But destiny has a way of tearing down walls when we least expect it. For weeks, Amara survived on scraps. She carried her unborn child while carrying the weight of the world. Rain soaked through her shoes, and nights were spent curled against brick walls for warmth. She began to notice Charles, though not by name. He walked past her corner often, tall, confident, polished. His eyes never met hers. He carried himself with the cold assurance of a man untouchable by the suffering around him. To Amara, he was just another passerby who chose blindness. But to Charles, something unexpected was stirring. At first, it was irritation. Why was she always there, like a shadow haunting his path? But slowly, irritation gave way to curiosity. He began to notice details. Her belly, round and heavy with life. The way she tried to shield it with her thin arms. The quiet strength in her eyes despite the exhaustion. One evening, after a particularly brutal business meeting, Charles caught himself thinking about her. Not about the deal he had won, not about the numbers on his balance sheet, but about that girl on the sidewalk, her breath fogging in the winter air, her hands trembling as she held her belly. He told himself it wasn't his concern. He owed her nothing. Yet the image stayed. Amara, meanwhile, was reaching her breaking point. The days grew colder, her body weaker. Hunger gnawed at her constantly, but she was determined not to give up. For her baby, she had to keep going. And so, day after day, she endured the humiliation of being unseen. But deep down, she hoped, prayed, that anyone would look her way. The night everything changed was stormy. Rain poured down in sheets, drenching the city. Amara's contractions had begun, too early and too strong. She tried to make her way to the shelter, but her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed on the sidewalk, clutching her stomach, gasping for breath. People rushed by, their umbrellas shielding them not just from the rain, but from responsibility. No one stopped. No one even looked. And then Charles appeared. For a brief moment, his instinct told him to keep walking. This wasn't his problem. But something in him hesitated. He saw her face, twisted in pain, rain mixing with tears. He saw her hands clutching her belly, fighting for both her life and her child's. Something inside him cracked. Charles rushed to her side, his expensive suit soaking instantly. For the first time in his life, his money meant nothing. What mattered was the fragile life before him. He called an ambulance, staying by Amara's side as she fought through wave after wave of pain. For the first time, Amara was not invisible. Amara delivered her baby, a daughter, tiny but strong, under the sterile lights of a hospital room. Charles, the man who had once been the definition of cold indifference, stayed close. He paid for her medical bills, her housing, her food. But more importantly, he listened. He learned about her dreams of becoming a nurse, her strength in surviving abandonment, and her love for the child she now held. In her story, Charles found a humanity he had buried long ago. In the weeks that followed, Charles changed. Quietly, he began funding shelters, supporting young black mothers, and working to create safe spaces for those society had cast aside. As for Amara, she finally had a chance, not just to survive, but to thrive. With her baby in her arms, she returned to her studies, determined to fulfill her dream of becoming a nurse. And it all began because, for one night, a cold millionaire decided not to look away. Sometimes, the greatest wealth is not counted in dollars, but in compassion. Backhand index pointing right, how many lives could change if we stopped walking past those in need?